Alright, and for the third photo, I'm going to be doing one that's actually pretty difficult to clean up. And with this one, we're going to be doing channel selection. So I have this loaded in here as a smart object. You can do that by going to File, Place Linked, and then grabbing the photo that you want to put in, or just clicking and dragging it from the folder or from Bridge. So I'm going to go in and double click this smart object, and it opens it up as its own one-layered photo. And here I'm going to, usually in the layers panel you have layers, paths, and channels. And I'm going to click on channels. And what the channels are is actually, it breaks down the image into the red, green, and blue channels. If you're in CMYK mode, you'll have the cyan, magenta, black, all those channels, yellow. It'll all be right here. So if I click off of these channels, at least one needs to be selected. But like if I have blue and green, it's just going to show the blue and green information. If I have red and green, it's just going to show that. It won't show any blue. So all three of these together are what make up this picture. And what I'll do here is go individually through these and see which channel has the best contrast. And I'm looking mostly here for the contrast between the hair and the background. And that actually has the best contrast right here. So this one might be a little tricky because I'm going to reverse this through white. And I'm going to do the hair as a channel selection and the rest of it as a selection in, or I might possibly do both. One with the hair is dark and one with it light. So sometimes you have to get the head separate from the body if you have kind of funky lighting like this. So I'm going to take this red channel, drag it down to the new layer button to duplicate it, and I'm going to hit Control L, which brings up the levels, and what I want to do is increase the contrast between the light hair and the dark background, and I don't want to go too far. Like there, you're starting to lose all your information. So I want to go just dark enough that the white strands stick out more. But not so much that they're getting really lost. So I think something like that's really good. And what I'm going to do on this, it's because it's a copy of the channel, it's kind of its own layer. So I'm actually going to take my lasso tool, zoom in a little bit more so I can get closer, and then I'm going to get as close as I can to the outline of the hair without going into the parts where it would show some of the background. Okay, I can press my space bar to go down a little bit. I wasn't down far enough. Press my space bar again. Alright, so I have a really rough selection here, and I'm going to fill it with my background color, which is white, with Control Backspace. And I'll deselect that with Control D. So this hair right here, I'm going to need to pick up when I do the darker color. But I'm going to mainly focus on this hair up here. So I'm going to take a white brush and get a little bit closer to the edge here in some of the areas where I needed that. Alright, for the most part, the rest of it is going to be, whoops. Actually, really don't want that there. Yeah, for the most part, the rest of this is going to be dodge and burn. So the dodge and burn tools are the hand, it looks like a little hand and a little, I don't know, ping pong paddle. The dodge tool brings out the light and the burn increases the dark. So we're going to be using both. And what this is going to do is increase the contrast here so that it's picked up better. And I just kind of go around. I'm using the burn tool right now so that the dark around the white areas is darker. And again, it's really tricky on this one because it's pretty light in some areas of the background and dark in others. And I want to get as dark and as much contrast as possible. And that will really bring out the hair. And I'm actually going to take my white brush again and touch up a few of these areas where I don't want as hard of a line, because that will show up as a really hard line when I get my hair cut out. Alright, back to the burn. Get a little more contrast here. And you're going to lose it a little bit. You're going to lose some of the hair. I'm going to make that a little bit smaller and go in here. Alright, now I'm actually going to take the dodge and bring some of that white back out. And I think I'm going to decrease this exposure a bit. And you don't want to do this too much. You're going to highlight it just a little bit, but every bit that you do that's white will show up. So some of these hairs will still get a little lost in there. But if you can increase some of these areas that need it, that would be a big help for the selection. Alright. Oops, my exposure went up to 100%. I did not want that. That's why it was really high contrast. So actually, if you have it on a lower exposure, you'll be able to pick some of these back out again. Alright, so that has a bit of a bloom around it, but it's not too much of a bloom. So I'm going to use my lasso tool again and go right around the edges of all the hair that I want in this selection. And everything outside the lasso tool, I'm going to invert my selection, Control-Shift-I, and fill it with black. Control backspace. So I'm left with this selection that still has some haze around it. And I'm going to run Control-L for levels again on this layer and try and tone down some of this contrast again. And again, make sure you don't do it so far that you lose the information. And I'm going to take my brush, make sure it's on black, and paint out some of those areas that we definitely don't want to be in the selection. And here's where I'll take the dodge and burn again, especially the burn tool down here. Increase that exposure just a bit. Because I don't want as much of a halo around the hair. I just want it to be a selection of hair, not the background that it would have had. And you will get a little bit of a halo, but we're also going to get that out when we move it back into the main picture. Okay. So it's a pretty close selection. I'm going to burn it or dodge it just a little bit down here. Alright, so this would be our hair selection. And I'm going to control click on this. And what that does is it selects all the white data on this entire layer. So, and that's why I filled that with black. And I'm going to turn all of our channels back on, turn that copy off, go back into layers, duplicate this layer so that I'm not working on it destructively, and then layer mask that selection. And I'll show you what I did here with gradient layers. It's actually a pretty good hair selection. Not perfect, but pretty good to start with. From the background we started with, that I think that ended up pretty well. So I'll go ahead and duplicate this again, and I'm going to delete this layer mask. And here's one method of selection that actually is really, really easy, and I use this a lot for quick compositions. And make sure you are in the quick select mode. Either quick selection or magic wand, either one will work. And then at the top you'll hit select subject. Now this only works with the newest version of Photoshop, so that's the 2018 version. And this selects the hair sort of well, but you're going to get some remnants around that. But I'm mainly just doing this to quickly demo how that can be done. So I'm just going to hit OK on that. And that actually makes a half decent selection. You got a lot of remnants here, so you will kind of need to go and clean a lot of that up. But just for this tutorial, I'm going to leave that be because I'm mostly focused on the hair right now. For the hair, I am going to move that opacity down just a little bit to see where this layer is and the one beneath it ends. And I'm going to control click on the top hair mask to select that, and control shift I to invert that selection. Now on my bottom layer, whoops, I don't want to invert that. I'm going to invert it again with control shift I. On my bottom layer, I mostly want that layer gone. So I'm just going to take a black brush and go over it. So it's mostly gone on my bottom layer. Anything still there, I'm going to kind of pick out. Although sometimes you do actually want some of that. But yeah, that will show up kind of strange. So I'm going to get rid of that. Alright, so when I move this opacity up again, it's basically the full model. Sometimes when you select like that, you do get a little bit of a line there, so just go back in and with the white brush kind of blend those two areas together. So you basically have head and the under the head. With this head, I'm going to duplicate that, and on the layer underneath, I will do what I did before, and this time I'm actually just going to clone it. I'm going to add a new layer. Yeah, create clipping mask. And because I already have this underneath, I'm going to use the clone brush to bring out some of these highlights. And actually I need to change to a standard brush, just kind of a big soft fuzzy brush. And this is going to bring back some of that hair that was otherwise lost or is too light. And you do need to be a little careful. Like right there, I just stamped a section that does not work with that because it's going this way. So here I'd need to make my brush a little bit smaller. You definitely want to make sure it blends in. And again, this isn't an exact science, so the same method won't always work the same way twice, or every photo requires a little bit of different touch. So I have some of that in there, and that does help. It brings that out a little more. Actually, some of these areas, it looks better without it. And I'm going to leave that, some of that on the right, and take out some of it on the left. I'm going to use the eraser tool and just kind of get rid of that because that's actually a sharper cut. And I am going to duplicate this one more time. Put that underneath both of those other heads. I'm going to levels, and I'll clip that down. You can also clip the levels down with this little button and make it darker. And I'm just going to set that layer to multiply. With her hair lighter, that actually does not completely work. So try that as screen. And making it lighter instead. And that actually also doesn't work. So yeah, sometimes, and then it does bring out more here, and it brings out a little more up here. But, so here's where I'd take my layer mask and paint out the areas that I don't like it. It's like I don't like it as much down here. But it does give more definition to the hair up there if I want that. And I can pull that opacity down a little bit if I don't want that. So, and here her hair is a little dark for a light background, so this underlayer wouldn't work as well with that. So it all kind of depends on what background you're working with, how you want it to blend. Yeah, and here I'd need to take out some of the halo here too. So I know we are going to be on a darker background. So I'm going to go ahead and keep that as, whoops, darker here. And I will turn off everything but my cutout and hit save. I'm going to go back into here and right click, replace contents with my new file, and that has my cutout. And on that background, that's pretty decent. There's still some areas of the hair that could be darker, and that's where you'd either go back and kind of really rework it with this original file to where this hair would stand out more. And you might even want to take some of the original, reselect this, and use some of the select and mask in here too. And that might be able to bring out some more in here. Yeah, it does bring out a little bit more. Not a whole lot, but a little bit. And I'm actually going to put a normal layer on, put a normal solid color adjustment layer. And that does bring out more of the color here. And there's a little bit of a weird halo going on there. I'm going to paint some of that back in. And I'll use the clone tool again. Just to get some of that back in there. And this you need to rework several times sometimes, especially if you're doing it with a larger brush. You don't want any patterns there. Like this is very close to that, so you'd want to break that up a little. And that's getting a little better on the top there. So you basically just need to play with it, kind of find exactly where it feels good, it feels comfortable. Still going to be a little hairy on a darker background, and I'm actually going to select all of these here, put them in a folder, and get rid of some of this. Some of this fuzzy bits. Ideally, the stock you want to pick is stock that has lighter backgrounds, more contrast. It'll be a lot easier to cut out, and you won't have to do as much finessing like this. But that's not always reality or even practical. Sometimes you'll find a head that is just really perfect, or any model that's really perfect, and they just won't have the best hair for cutting out. So yeah, that cleaned that up just a little bit more. So I'm going to save that, and that will update my smart object in this image. Or it should, at least. There we go. That's the updated version. So there's a little bit more definition between more detail. More detail and definition between that and the one we just did. So from here, you'd be able to add highlights. You'll still have a little bit of stuff going on here a little bit, and you can play with that, kind of tease it out a little more, but you might not even need to. On a image like this background's pretty dark, so I'll just do a really quick manipulation here of how you might frame this model against this background. So I put a layer right above the background. I'm going to put a bit of a glow behind her. Because that often makes it more dramatic. And on top of her, I'm going to put some smaller flares and really knock that opacity down. That'll kind of blend it a little better. And there's also some light coming from this side, so knock that down a little. And I think we're going to put a solid color here so that that's not as dark in the background. Just kind of make it look like there's a little bit of a mist and she's standing out more. On an actual cover, she's kind of placed really odd, but I'm just going to leave her be for this tutorial. Text often goes at the bottom, so I'm going to cheat and bring stuff in there. I will put some smoke with smoke brushes. I'm going to put some behind her. And some more in front of her with lighter. So it looks kind of like fog. And on her, I'm going to... Here's a quick hack if you have a nice model but don't have the rest of the body. If you put fog in front of them, you can hide a lot of stuff behind fog. So if you take a general brush, just your big soft fuzzy brush, and actually, you know what, I'm going to lasso this right at her edge where her body ends. And I'm just going to fill that with black. So you really can't tell that the rest of her body is not there. And do a quick color adjustment with gradient map. I like to use gradient maps because they pretty quickly add a lot of interesting color. And I'm just going to leave that as for now. Pull that back a little bit. Maybe change out the pink to a green. Also add a color lookup. This is another way to change the color really quickly. I will add a bit more color or a bit more light around her here with some overlay. And just a light halo around her. We still have a little bit of dark going on there, which I would normally take a lot more time to paint out. But for this purpose, we're just going to do it really quick. And I'm just doing this at 100% for now, but I will flip it to overlay and really knock it back. And you don't want a whole lot of glow, so I'm actually going to erase some of this here. Turn my eraser back to about 40%. Yeah, some of this hair did get a little odd here, so that particular picture might take more work. And you could actually cut it right down to right around this middle part right here if you would need to. That was a particularly hard picture to cut out the hair because of the contrast in the background. But often enough when I have stuff like that going on, I kind of cover it with alright, I'm trying to paint with my eraser. I cover it with some light flares, which can kind of really take the emphasis off of that. So there's some little tricks and hacks to really make it pop. But those are some basic methods of cutting out the models. Because of most stock photography being not optimal for cutting out models, you will need to do quite a bit of finessing on some of these. This one, this type of a cutout is trickier, and there's different methods work better for different models, definitely. Let's see, our original model here, she was cut out pretty well. Her hair was very easy, and she would also be one that would have been very easy to cut out with channel levels, especially because of the dark hair and light background. This model, so you're also getting some of that hair in there, and that would need to be darkened. But yeah, so different methods of cutting out, and see if I darken that there, set that to a solid dark color, clipping mask that, and that would work well to get that darker for her, to quick fix that. But turn this model back on. Yeah, cutting out is an art form, not really a science. It'd be nice if every stock photo was a white background with a perfectly lit model, but you won't run across that all the time. So a lot of times you will kind of have to deal with some of this little bit of fuzziness, and that's where you can kind of paint things in a little bit, use those hair brushes, use the clone brush, play around with it a bit, and then you'll get a really nice cutout with these methods. So okay, thank you for watching this tutorial, and I hope you have a great day. And remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel, where I will be posting more videos on how to work with stock photography for book covers.